Rose, you stole my life saving and used to buy a car?
I helped you spend it properly.
Now I will know how you will travel abroad after.
After everything I sacrificed for you to go to school.
How did a loving family become completely destroyed? How did jealousy grow so deep that one sister could betray her other in the cruelest way possible? And why did Ada, after becoming successful and returning home as a doctor, refuse to visit her own mother in prison? Sometimes, the people who hurt us the most are the same people we once sacrificed everything for. This is not just a story about family. It is a story about love, betrayal, sacrifice, jealousy, and the painful price of choosing the wrong child over the right one. What happened in this family shocked an entire village and changed their lives forever. But to truly understand how everything fell apart, we must go back to the beginning. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our next emotional and life-changing story. In the small village of Umudara, where the mornings began with the sound of crowing roosters and women sweeping dusty compounds before sunrise, the family of Mr. Uche was once known as a peaceful and loving family. They were not rich, but they had enough to survive, and in the eyes of the villagers, peace inside a home was worth more than money. Mr. Uche was a calm and hard-working man who believed that every child deserved love and fairness. But his wife, Mrs. Vera, did not see things the same way. From the very beginning, her heart leaned more toward her younger daughter Rose, and everybody in the house could feel it, even without her saying it out loud. Ada, the first daughter, grew up learning silence before she learned happiness. She was the kind of girl who woke before everyone else in the house, tied her wrapper tightly around her waist, and began the day's work without waiting to be told. While other girls her age played in the field after school, Ada stayed behind, helping her mother cook, fetch water, wash clothes, and clean the compound. Even when she was tired, she rarely complained. There was a quiet kindness inside her that made people love her naturally. She was intelligent too, very intelligent, the kind of child teachers would point at proudly during school meetings. But inside that house, her intelligence was treated like something ordinary, something expected, never something special. Rose was different. Rose was beautiful in a way that made people stop and look twice whenever she walked past. She knew it too. From a young age, she learned how to smile sweetly when she wanted something, how to cry when she wanted attention, and how to twist situations until she became the victim. While Ada walked, Rose played. While Ada sacrificed, Rose enjoyed. And somehow, Mrs. Vera always found a reason to defend her. One hot afternoon, Ada stood beside a large pot in the backyard, sweat running down her face as smoke from the firewood entered her eyes. She coughed softly while stirring soup for the family. Not far from her, Rose sat under the mango tree, laughing with her friends, eating groundnuts and doing nothing. Mr. Uche walked into the compound and stopped when he saw Ada struggling alone. "Ada, have you been here since morning?" he asked gently. Ada smiled softly despite her tiredness. "Mama said the visitors may come later, so I wanted everything to be ready." Mr. Uche looked toward Rose. "And your sister?" Before Ada could answer, Mrs. Vera stepped out from inside the house carrying a tray. "Leave Rose alone," she said quickly. "Must both of them suffer before you are happy?" Mr. Uche frowned slightly. "I only asked a question." Mrs. Vera hissed softly. "Rose is delicate. She's not strong like Ada." Ada lowered her head quietly and continued stirring the soup as if the words did not hurt her, but deep inside they did. Another evening, heavy rain fell across the village and cold wind entered through the broken window of their small sitting room. Ada sat on the floor washing school uniforms with her bare hands, while Rose sat comfortably on the bed admiring a new pair of shiny shoes their mother had bought for her. Ada's own sandals were old and torn at the edges, but nobody seemed to notice. Rose lifted one of the shoes excitedly. "Mama, everybody in school will be jealous when they see this." Mrs. Vera laughed proudly. "That is how it should be. My daughter must look different from others." Mr. Uche looked at Ada quietly. "What about Ada's shoes? Hands are already tearing." Mrs. Vera waved her hand dismissively. "Ada can manage. That girl does not care about those things." Mr. Uche sighed deeply. Or maybe she has simply learned not to ask. For a moment, silence filled the room. Ada continued washing quietly, pretending not to hear them, but her small hand slowed inside the bucket of soapy water. Later that night, Mr. Uche sat outside under the moonlight while Mrs. Vera joined him. The sound of crickets filled the darkness around them. He spoke after a long silence. "Vera, sometimes I worry." "What about?" she asked carelessly. "The way you treat these girls differently." Mrs. Vera scoffed immediately. "Different how? Rose gets everything. Ada gets responsibilities." Mrs. Vera folded her arms stubbornly. "Rose is special. One day she will lift this family." Mr. Uche looked toward the dark room where Ada was still awake, studying with a lantern. Then he asked quietly, "And what about Ada?" Mrs. Vera barely looked in that direction. "Ada is strong. She will survive anywhere." Mr. Uche shook his head slowly, pain resting quietly in his eyes. Sometimes the strongest children are the ones suffering the most. But Mrs. Vera dismissed him completely. "You worry too much." Inside the room, Ada continued reading her books under the weak lantern light, unaware that life was already preparing a heavy sacrifice for her, a sacrifice that would change everything in that family forever.
The year Ada and Rose finished secondary school was the same year hope entered their house like sunlight after a long rain. For the first time in many years, laughter returned fully to the compound because both girls had passed their exams well enough to gain admission into the university. Even the villagers congratulated Mr. Uche whenever they saw him on the road. "Your daughters have made you proud," they would say, and the old man would smile humbly, though deep inside he already knew a storm was coming. It did not take long before the problem revealed itself. One evening, Mr. Uche spread papers carefully on the small wooden table inside the sitting room, while Mrs. Vera sat beside him, counting money over and over again as if the amount would magically increase. Ada and Rose sat quietly nearby, watching their parents in silence. The air inside the room felt heavy. Finally, Mr. Uche sighed deeply and removed his glasses slowly. "The money is not enough," he said quietly. Nobody spoke at first. Mrs. Vera lowered the money in her hands. "How much are we still lacking?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. "Too much," Mr. Uche replied. "I can barely sponsor one child comfortably, talk less of two." Silence filled the room immediately. Ada's heart began beating faster. Rose looked down nervously. Mr. Uche rubbed his forehead tiredly. "Maybe I can borrow from somebody." But Mrs. Vera quickly shook her head. "Borrow from who? Everybody in this village is struggling." The room became quiet again until Mrs. Vera slowly turned her eyes toward Ada. There was something calculated in the way she looked at her. "Ada," she said softly. Ada looked up immediately. "Yes, Mama." Mrs. Vera adjusted her wrapper carefully before speaking again. "You are the older one." Ada frowned slightly, already sensing where the conversation was going. "Yes, Mama." Mrs. Vera leaned forward. Sometimes in life, the older child must sacrifice for the younger ones. Ada's chest tightened instantly. Mama, what do you mean? Mrs. Vera exhaled slowly, like someone about to give wise advice. Rose should go first. The words landed heavily inside the room. Ada blinked slowly, unable to speak at first. Mr. Uche immediately looked at his wife, Vera, but she raised her hand to stop him. Let me finish. Then she turned back to Ada. You are hardworking, strong. You can survive without school for now. But Rose, she glanced proudly at her younger daughter, Rose needs this opportunity more. Ada stared at her mother in disbelief. Mama, I also gained admission. And nobody is denying that, Mrs. Vera replied quickly. But look around you. We do not have money for both of you. Rose remained silent, avoiding Ada's eyes completely. Ada swallowed hard. So, what are you saying? Mrs. Vera spoke calmly, almost too calmly. I am saying you should let your sister go first. The room suddenly felt smaller. Ada looked toward her father desperately, hoping he would say something immediately, but Mr. Uche only lowered his head sadly. Ada's voice trembled. But Mama, becoming a doctor is my dream. Mrs. Vera's expression hardened slightly. Dreams do not feed families. Those words pierced Ada deeply. Mama, listen to me carefully, Mrs. Vera interrupted firmly. Rose is younger. If she succeeds, she can help all of us later. You are the older one. Sacrifice for your sister. Ada's eyes slowly filled with tears. Why is it always me? The question escaped before she could stop it. Silence followed instantly. Mrs. Vera frowned. What do you mean by that? Ada wiped her face quickly. Nothing, but the pain was already pouring out of her. Since we were children, it has always been Rose first. Rose this, Rose that. Why is my own dream less important? Mrs. Vera hissed softly. Do not start talking like an ungrateful child. Mr. Uche finally spoke quietly. Vera, enough. But his voice carried no real power against the decision already forming inside the house. Rose finally spoke softly, pretending innocence. Ada, if you want to go, it's okay. But there was no real sincerity inside her voice. Ada looked at her sister for a long moment before standing up slowly. I need air, she whispered, before walking outside. That night, the entire village slept peacefully while Ada cried alone behind the house. The moonlight fell softly across her face as she sat on an old wooden bench, clutching her admission letter tightly against her chest. Tears rolled endlessly down her cheeks. She had imagined this moment for years. She had imagined wearing a white doctor's coat someday, imagined saving lives, imagined making her father proud. But now, that dream was slipping away quietly before it had even begun. Through the small window of the house, she could see Rose happily arranging clothes into a small traveling bag, smiling excitedly about university life, while their mother helped her fold dresses neatly. Ada watched silently, her heart breaking little by little. Later that night, Mr. Uche stepped outside and found her still sitting there crying softly. His heart shattered immediately. He sat beside her quietly. My daughter. Ada wiped her face quickly. I'm sorry, Papa. I tried not to cry. Mr. Uche shook his head painfully. You don't need to apologize for pain. Ada looked at the admission letter in her hand. I studied so hard. I know. I prayed every night. I know. Her voice broke completely. Why does it feel like my dream does not matter? Mr. Uche could not answer immediately because tears had already gathered in his own eyes. Finally, he spoke softly. Your dream matters, Ada. Never let anybody convince you otherwise. Ada cried harder. Then why can't I go? Mr. Uche looked away helplessly. Because sometimes poverty forces good people to make terrible choices.
Silence settled between them. After Rose left for the university, the house became quieter, but not peaceful. There was an emptiness that followed Ada everywhere she went, the kind that comes when a person loses something important, but is forced to pretend they are okay. In the mornings, she still woke early to sweep the compound and fetch water, but sometimes, when nobody was watching, she would pause for a moment and stare at the road Rose had taken when she left for school. Deep inside her heart, the pain was still there. She had sacrificed her dream, but life around her continued as if nothing had happened. Only Mr. Uche truly understood the weight his daughter carried. One evening, he returned home tired from the farm with dust covering his slippers and sweat soaking his shirt. Ada quickly brought him water to wash his hands. As he sat outside under the mango tree, he watched her carefully for a long moment before speaking. "Ada?" he called softly. "Yes, Papa," she answered gently. He cleared his throat. "You may not be going to university now, but your life cannot stop because of that." Ada lowered her eyes quietly. "I know, Papa." Mr. Uche reached into his pocket slowly and brought out a small wrapped cloth containing some money. "I spoke with a man in the next village. He teaches fish farming and goat rearing. I want you to learn." Ada looked at him in surprise. "Fish farming?" He nodded. "And goat rearing too. It may not be your dream, but it can become your beginning." Ada held the small money carefully, and for the first time in many days, a little hope returned to her face. "Thank you, Papa." Mr. Uche smiled faintly. "Do not thank me yet. Thank me when you succeed." From that week onward, Ada threw herself into the training with all her heart. Every morning before sunrise, while the village was still quiet and covered in cold mist, she would wake up, tie her wrapper firmly, and begin the long walk to the farm where she was learning. The old farmer who trained her was strict but wise.
Years passed slowly, like dry seasons that refused to end, and eventually, the day Rose graduated from the university finally arrived. Mrs. Vera celebrated it like a festival inside the village. She wore her best wrapper, danced proudly in the compound, and told every neighbor willing to listen that her daughter was now a graduate. "My daughter is educated," she kept saying proudly. All the sacrifice was worth it. Even before Rose returned home, Mrs. Vera had already begun boasting about the great future waiting for her. Soon she will get a big office job in the city, she told women at the market. Then all our suffering will end. But life does not always follow the stories people tell themselves. When Rose finally returned to the village after graduation, she arrived with confidence shining all over her face. She stepped down from the bus wearing expensive clothes, dark sunglasses, and speaking with the pride of someone who believed success was already waiting for her. Mrs. Vera rushed forward immediately and hugged her tightly. "My graduates!" she cried happily. Rose smiled proudly. "Mama, village life almost smells strange to me now." Mrs. Vera laughed loudly, like it was the funniest thing in the world. Even Ada smiled softly and welcomed her home warmly, despite everything she had sacrificed for her. "Welcome back, Rose," she said sincerely. But while everybody celebrated, Mr. Uche remained unusually quiet. Deep inside, he carried a hope he was too afraid to speak aloud. He prayed silently that maybe, just maybe, everything Ada lost would at least produce something meaningful for the family. The jealousy growing inside Rose did not arrive loudly like thunder. It came quietly, slowly, like poison dripping into clean water little by little, until everything changed. The more she watched Ada succeed, the more bitterness consumed her heart. Every smile Ada received from villagers felt like an insult to her. Every customer who praised Ada felt like another reminder of her own failure.
Instead of asking herself where she had gone wrong, Rose blamed the sister who had once sacrificed everything for her. And as the elders often say, a jealous heart can become more dangerous than an open enemy. One evening, Ada returned home tired but happy after making good sales at the market. She sat outside counting small bundles of money carefully, while Mr. Uche watched proudly nearby. "Business was good today?" he asked gently. Ada smiled softly. "Very good, Papa. One customer even paid in advance for 2 goats next month." Mr. Uche nodded with quiet pride. "Your hard work is speaking for you." From inside the house, Rose watched them silently through the window. Her jaw tightened slowly. She could not remember the last time her father had looked at her with that kind of pride. Later that night, while everybody slept peacefully, Rose remained awake. The moonlight entered faintly through her window as dark thoughts moved restlessly through her mind. Finally, she stood up slowly and reached beneath her bed, where she had hidden a small container she bought secretly from a local chemical seller earlier that day. She stared at it silently for a moment. Her breathing became heavier. Somewhere deep inside her conscience, a voice whispered that what she was about to do was wrong. But another voice, louder and uglier, reminded her of Ada's success, Ada's dreams, Ada's growing respect. Bitterness won. Quietly, Rose stepped outside into the dark compound. The night air was cold and silent except for the sound of insects singing from nearby bushes. She moved carefully toward the goat pen, glancing around to make sure nobody was awake. The goats shifted softly as she approached them. Her hand trembled slightly as she mixed the poison into their feed. For one brief second, guilt flashed across her face. Then her expression hardened again. She looked at the healthy animals quietly and whispered with a cold smile, "Let us see how far your luck will carry you." Then she walked back inside as if nothing had happened. Morning came peacefully, but peace does not always mean safety. Ada woke Bray as usual and carried food toward the goat pen with soft humming under her breath.
But the moment she reached the enclosure, the ball slipped from her hands immediately. 2 of her biggest, healthiest goats lay motionless on the ground, flies already gathered around them. Ada froze completely. "No," she whispered weakly. She rushed forward immediately, kneeling beside the animals with shaking hands. "No, no, wake up!" Her voice broke as tears filled her eyes instantly. She touched one goat desperately, hoping somehow it was still alive, but the body was cold already. "Papa!" she cried loudly. "Papa!" Her scream shattered the peaceful e-morning. Mr. Uche rushed outside immediately, while neighbors nearby began peeking over fences curiously. The moment he saw the dead goats, his face darkened with shock. "Jesus!" Ada burst into uncontrollable tears. "Papa, they were fine yesterday. They were perfectly fine." She held one of the goats tightly, as if refusing to accept reality. Those goats were not just animals to her. They represented months of hard work, sacrifice, sleepless nights, and dreams she had carefully built piece by piece. Rose slowly stepped outside, pretending to be confused by the noise. "What happened?" she asked softly. Ada looked up at her through tears. "My gods!" Rose widened her eyes dramatically. "Oh my God!" She placed her hand over her chest, pretending shock, but hidden behind her expression was a secret satisfaction too dark for anyone else to see. Mrs. Vera came outside moments later and immediately frowned at the scene. "Again?" she snapped impatiently. "What kind of bad luck follows this girl everywhere?" Ada cried harder. "Mama, I don't understand what happened." Mrs. Vera folded her arms carelessly. "Maybe you still don't know how to manage animals properly." Mr. Uche immediately turned toward his wife angrily. "Can't you see she's already hurting?" But Mrs. Vera only hissed softly and walked away. Ada remained on the ground, crying heavily beside the dead goats, while villagers slowly gathered nearby, whispering among themselves. Rose stood quietly watching everything. Deep inside, something cruel enjoyed the pain on her sister's face. By that time, Ada's dream no longer felt impossible. After years of sacrifice, years of waking before sunrise, years of saving every small profit while denying herself comfort, she had finally gathered enough money to begin the process of studying medicine abroad. Even saying it aloud felt unreal sometimes. At night, when she sat alone with her books, she would quietly whisper the names of foreign schools to herself like prayers. For the first time in many years, hope no longer felt far away. And that hope made Rose's jealousy grow darker than ever before. One bright morning, Ada woke up earlier than usual, excitement and nervousness moving together inside her chest. She carefully ironed her simple clothes and arranged her documents neatly inside a worn brown file. Her passport, application papers, interview details, certificates, everything she had worked toward for years sat carefully inside that file. Mr. Uche watched her proudly while she prepared. "You barely slept last night," he said gently. Ada smiled nervously. "I kept imagining the interview questions." Mr. Uche chuckled softly. "You have already survived harder things than interviews." Ada looked down quietly. "What if something goes wrong?" He shook his head firmly. "Good things will not run away from you forever, my daughter." Before leaving, Ada stepped into the kitchen where Mrs. Vera and Rose sat eating breakfast. "Mama, I'm leaving now," she said softly. Mrs. Vera barely looked up. Rose forced a fake smile. "Good luck." Ada smiled sincerely. "Thank you." Then she hurried out of the house with hope glowing softly inside her tired eyes, completely unaware that evil had already entered behind her. A few hours later, the compound became quiet. Mr. Uche had gone out to check a nearby farm, and Mrs. Vera was visiting a neighbor. Rose remained alone inside the house, scrolling lazily through her phone. Then suddenly, she heard the sound of a message alert coming from Ada's room. At first, she ignored it, but moments later, another alert entered. Curious, Rose stood up slowly and walked into Ada's room. Ada's small button phone rested carelessly on the bed beside some papers. Rose picked it up casually, intending only to glance at the message. But the moment she opened it, her entire expression changed. Her eyes widened slowly. It was a bank alert. A customer had transferred payment into Ada's account. The amount was large, very large. Rose's heartbeat quickened immediately. She stared at the account balance displayed beneath the alert and nearly stopped breathing. Ada had saved enough money not only for her visa process, but enough to comfortably begin medical school abroad. Rose sat down slowly on the bed, still staring at the phone in disbelief. "No," she whispered. Her chest tightened painfully. "After everything," her voice shook with bitterness as tears of anger gathered in her eyes. "After everything, she still became better than me?" Rage swallowed her completely in that moment. Everything she had spent years believing about herself began collapsing before her eyes. She was supposed to be the successful one, the educated one, the chosen child. Yet Ada, the sister she pitied, the sister who sacrificed her own future, was now standing on the edge of becoming something greater than all of them. Rose's breathing became heavier as jealousy poisoned her thoughts completely. Then her eyes slowly moved toward the small bag lying beside Ada's bed. She already knew where Ada kept her ATM card. Silence filled the room for a long moment while Rose fought briefly with the last small piece of conscience left inside her. Then slowly, she stood up. Bitterness won again. By afternoon, Rose was already inside a busy bank in town, wearing dark glasses and pretending calmness while her heart raced wildly inside her chest. She had secretly memorized Ada's phone password months earlier after watching her use it carelessly one evening. One transfer after another, she emptied almost
everything from Ada's account into her own newly opened account, leaving only a tiny amount behind. Each alert entering Ada's phone felt like another knife stabbing through years of sacrifice. But Rose felt no pity anymore, only satisfaction. Later that same day, she drove into one of the biggest car shops in the city with stolen confidence shining all over her face. Salesmen rushed toward her immediately the moment they saw the amount in her account. Rose smiled proudly while choosing a luxurious, expensive car far beyond anything she truly deserved. She bought expensive clothes, jewelry, shoes, wigs, and perfumes like someone trying to bury insecurity beneath luxury. Everywhere she went that day, she felt powerful for the first time in years. Meanwhile, far away at the airport, Ada sat quietly among other travelers, clutching her file nervously while waiting for her visa interview. Her heart beat fast with hope and fear mixed together. She kept rehearsing answers silently inside her mind. Why do you want to study abroad? How will you sponsor your education? What are your plans after graduation? She had prepared for this moment for years.
Then, suddenly, her small phone vibrated repeatedly inside her handbag. At first, she ignored it because phones were not allowed during parts of the interview process. But the vibration continued, again and again. Something inside her became uneasy. Slowly, she brought the phone out and opened the messages. The moment her eyes saw the alerts, the world around her seemed to stop moving. Debit alert, another debit alert, another. Huge amounts disappearing from her account one after another. Ada stared at the screen in complete confusion. Her hands began trembling violently. "No," she whispered weakly. She checked the remaining balance. Almost everything was gone. Her breathing immediately became unstable. "No! People nearby began glancing at her strangely as panic consumed her completely. Tears rushed into her eyes instantly. Years of sacrifice, gone. Years of pain, gone. Her dream, disappearing before her eyes. She quickly tried calling the bank with shaking fingers, but her thoughts were no longer clear. Her chest tightened painfully. When her interview number was finally called, Ada could barely stand properly. She walked into the interview room pale and emotionally broken. The interviewer asked simple questions, but her mind could no longer focus. "Why do you want to study medicine?" the interviewer asked politely. Ada opened her mouth, but tears suddenly filled her eyes. Her voice failed completely. The interviewer frowned slightly. "Are you all right?" Ada tried to compose herself, but her body kept shaking uncontrollably. Questions became blurry. Words stopped making sense. Everything she had fought for felt like it was collapsing in real time. Minutes later, the interview ended badly, very badly. Ada walked out of the airport like someone whose soul had been ripped out completely. She sat alone outside on a bench, staring blankly at her nearly empty account balance, while tears rolled endlessly down her cheeks. She did not yet know who had destroyed her dream, but somewhere far away, Rose sat inside her newly purchased luxury car, smiling to herself while touching the steering wheel proudly, unaware that some betrayals destroy not only families, but the humanity inside the person committing them. By the time Ada returned from the airport, evening had already begun to fall across the village, but there was no peace inside her heart. She walked slowly down the dusty road toward home, like someone carrying the weight of death on her shoulders. Her eyes were swollen from crying, her hands still trembling from shock. Every step felt heavy. People she passed greeted her warmly, unaware that the dream she had carried for years had just been shattered in a single afternoon.
Inside the house, Mrs. Vera sat comfortably eating roasted corn while listening to the radio. The moment she saw Ada enter looking broken, she frowned immediately. What happened? Ada dropped her file weakly onto the floor. Tears gathered in her eyes again instantly. My money, her voice cracked painfully. Somebody emptied my account. Mrs. Vera stared at her for a second before clicking her tongue in annoyance instead of concern. What do you mean somebody emptied your account? Ada wiped her face helplessly. I don't know. I just started receiving alerts at the airport. Almost everything is gone. Mrs. Vera stood up sharply. Jesus Christ, how can somebody just steal all your money like that? Ada shook her head while crying. I don't know, Mama. I don't know how it happened. But instead of comforting her, her expression hardened immediately. Careless girl. Ada froze slightly. Mama, how can you save that kind of money and not protect it properly? Mrs. Vera snapped angrily. See your life now, after all these years of suffering. Ada looked completely shattered. Mama, I was trying. Trying what? Mrs. Vera interrupted harshly. If it was Rose, something like this would never happen. Those words hit Ada harder than the theft itself. Her knees weakened slowly, and she sat down heavily on the floor, crying quietly into her hands. Just then, the loud sound of a car horn echoed outside the compound. Mrs. Vera turned toward the door immediately in surprise, because expensive cars rarely entered their small village. Neighbors already began gathering outside curiously. Moments later, a shining luxury car slowly drove into the compound like something pulled from a rich man's dream. Ada looked up weakly through tears, confused.
Then the driver's door opened. Rose stepped out slowly, wearing expensive sunglasses, flashy clothes, shining jewelry, and high heels that clicked proudly against the ground. For a moment, nobody spoke. Even Mrs. Vera's mouth fell open in shock. "Rose?" she whispered. Rose smiled proudly and spread her arms dramatically. "Mama!" Mrs. Vera rushed toward her immediately. "Where did you get this car?" Rose laughed loudly. "Do you like it?" Ada stared silently at her sister, confusion slowly mixing with fear inside her chest. Then Rose turned toward Ada slowly, her smile becoming colder. She reached into her handbag carelessly, pulled out Ada's ATM card, and threw it directly onto the floor in front of her. Silence exploded across the compound instantly. Ada stared at the card without breathing. Her entire body went cold. Rose folded her arms proudly and laughed. "I helped you spend the money wisely." The world around Ada seemed to stop moving. "What?" Her voice barely came out. "What did you say?" Rose smiled wider. "You heard me." Ada's hands began shaking violently again. "You stole my money?" Rose shrugged carelessly. Stole is such an ugly word. Tears immediately rushed down Ada's face. "Rose, that money was my life." But Rose only laughed harder. "Please, you were acting too important because of small savings." Ada stood up slowly, heartbreak and disbelief mixing together inside her eyes. "Why would you do this to me?" Rose stepped closer, her jealousy finally naked and shameless. "Because I'm tired of watching everybody worship you like some village saint." Ada stared at her silently, completely broken. Rose continued bitterly. "Everywhere I go now, it's Ada this, Ada that. The hard-working daughter, the responsible daughter. Meanwhile, I'm the one who actually went to university." Ada's voice shook painfully. "I sacrificed that university for you, and nobody asked you to." Rose shouted back immediately. Those words pierced through Ada like a knife. "Nobody asked you to act like a martyr all your life." Ada looked at her sister as though seeing a stranger for the first time. "I loved you." Rose scoffed coldly. "Love does not make you better than me." Just then, Mr. Uche entered the compound carrying farm tools, but the moment he saw Ada crying and the tension around everyone, his face darkened immediately. "What is happening here?" Ada could barely speak.
Papa,
Her voice collapsed into tears. Rose took my money. Mr. Uche turned sharply toward Rose. What? Rose lifted her chin stubbornly. It's true. The old man stared at her in complete disbelief. You stole your sister's money? Rose rolled her eyes carelessly. She was going to waste everything abroad anyway. Before anybody could react further, Mr. Uche's hand landed heavily across Rose's face. The slap echoed across the compound so loudly that even neighbors outside gasped. Rose stumbled backward in shock, holding her cheek immediately. It was the first time her father had ever hit her. You wicked child, Mr. Uche shouted, his voice shaking with rage and heartbreak. After everything your sister sacrificed for you? But before he could move again, Mrs. Vera quickly stepped between them protectively. Don't you dare touch her again, she screamed. Mr. Uche stared at his wife in disbelief. Vera, this girl destroyed her sister's future. Mrs. Vera held Rose tightly behind her. So, you want to kill her because of money? Because of money? Mr. Uche repeated angrily. That money was Ada's entire life. Mrs. Vera hissed defensively. At least Rose used it for something visible. Ada looked at her mother slowly, pain flooding every part of her face. Mama, her voice trembled deeply. You're defending her? Mrs. Vera avoided her eyes. You should have been more careful. Those words completely destroyed something inside Ada. Tears rolled silently down her face as she realized nobody was coming to save her pain. Rose, still holding her cheek, suddenly began laughing bitterly again. She looked directly at Ada with cruel satisfaction shining inside her eyes. Tell us now, she mocked coldly. How will you travel abroad? Silence swallowed the compound completely. Ada stood there frozen, unable to speak, unable to breathe properly, unable to understand how the sister she once sacrificed everything for had become the same person destroying her future with laughter. Slowly, she sank to the ground, crying so hard that even some neighbors outside began wiping tears from their own eyes. But Rose only looked away proudly, while Mrs. Vera continued comforting her like she was still the victim. And in that moment, something deep inside Ada finally broke completely. Not just her dream, not just her heart, but the part of her that still believed family could never truly destroy you.
Mr. Uche could not sleep anymore. Every night he would sit outside the small house, looking at the dark sky, thinking about Ada and the weight she was carrying. One morning, without telling Mrs. Vera or Rose, he quietly went to sell the last pieces of land he owned. The land his father gave him, the land he promised to keep for old age. The buyer asked him, Uche, are you sure you want to do this? This land is your future. Mr. Uche answered softly, My daughter is my future. If she rises, I will not be poor. He also sold the small inheritance he had kept hidden for years. People in the village began to whisper, What is wrong with Uche? He is losing everything. But he did not answer anyone. He only carried the money home in a small bag. That night, he called Ada quietly into the room. Ada saw his tired face and immediately felt fear. Papa, what have you done? She asked. Mr. Uche placed the bag of money in her hands. This is for you, he said gently. Ada looked shocked. Papa, no, this is too much. You cannot give me everything like this. Her eyes filled with tears. Mr. Uche sat beside her and said, Ada, listen to me. I watched you give up your dream for this family. I watched you suffer in silence. A child like you deserves a future, not pain. Ada started crying heavily, holding his hand. "But Papa, what will happen to you? What will you eat? Where will you live?" Mr. Uche smiled sadly and said, "I have already lived enough. My joy now is seeing you become what you are meant to be." Ada shook her head, crying harder. "Papa, I feel like I am stealing your life." He touched her head and said softly, "No, my daughter, you are not stealing anything. I am giving it willingly." That night, Ada could not sleep. She kept whispering, "Papa is suffering because of me." But Mr. Uche sat outside and prayed, "God, let this sacrifice not be wasted." The next day, Ada gathered herself and tried again for her visa. She went through everything with trembling hands, but this time something felt different inside her, like strength she had never known before. Days later, the letter came. Approved. Ada stared at it in shock, her hands shaking. She whispered, "Papa, I need it." Mr. Uche read the letter, and tears filled his eyes. He held her tightly and said, "Go, my daughter. Walk into your future. Do not look back in fear." Ada cried on his shoulder and said, "I will not forget you, Papa. I will come back for you." Mr. Uche replied, "Even if I am not there, I will always be in your success." That same week, Ada left the village quietly. Mrs. Vera and Rose did not know anything. Only Mr. Uche stood at the road and watched the vehicle take her away, whispering, "My daughter has finally found her road." Without Ada in the house, something changed slowly but dangerously. The home that once had a quiet balance became empty of peace. Rose began to move with girls who had sharp tongues and restless eyes, girls who spoke of quick money and easy life. At first, it was small things, late nights, strange calls, expensive clothes she could not explain. Mrs. Vera noticed but refused to see it. When neighbors whispered, "Your daughter is moving with bad company," she snapped back, "My daughter is educated. Don't insult her." Mr. Uche tried to speak, but she shut him down every time. "You worry too much," she said. But Rose was already sleeping deeper. One evening, Mr. Uche caught her coming home very late. He asked quietly, "Rose, where are you coming from?" Rose avoided his eyes. "Papa, don't start." His voice shook. "This is not the life we raised you for." Rose laughed bitterly. "Life? What life? Ada took all the attention. Now I must take mine." Mr. Uche said, "Don't let jealousy destroy you." But she walked past him like she did not hear. Mrs. Vera still defended her. "Leave her alone. She's just enjoying her youth." Mr. Uche whispered, "This is not enjoyment. This is loss." But no one listened. Soon, Rose stopped pretending completely. She joined a group of criminal friends who moved like shadows in the night. She started small robberies, snatching phones, stealing from traders. Each time she came home, Mrs. Vera would ask, "Where did you get this money?" Rose would smile and say, "Mama, don't worry. I am helping the family now." And Mrs. Vera would nod proudly, blind to the danger. Mr. Uche would sit outside shaking his head, saying softly, "This path does not end well." One night, Rose came home with blood on her hand and a strange silence in her eyes. Mr. Uche stood up immediately. "Rose, what have you done?" he asked. She did not answer. Mrs. Vera rushed to her, holding her face. "My daughter, are you hurt?" Rose only said, "Money is everywhere if you are brave enough." Mr. Uche shouted, "This is not bravery, this is destruction." But Rose only smiled coldly and walked inside. Days later, she planned something bigger, a bank robbery with her group.
Mrs. Vera still believed nothing serious was happening. She even said, "My daughter is strong. She knows what she is doing." Mr. Uche begged her, "Call her back before it is too late." But she replied, "Stop speaking like a weak man." The day of the robbery came like a dark storm. It went wrong from the beginning. Security was tighter than expected, alarms screamed, people ran in panic, and police arrived faster than they thought. Rose tried to escape, but she was surrounded. As she was dragged into the police van, she shouted, "Mama!" But Mrs. Vera only came running too late, screaming her name in disbelief. At the station, during interrogation, Rose sat cold and exhausted. The officer asked, "Who do you share the stolen money with?" At first, she stayed silent. Then slowly she said, "My mother. She knows everything." Mrs. Vera was arrested the next day, her face pale with shock, shouting, "My daughter is lying." But the damage was done. The village heard everything. Whispers filled the air like fire. "The proud family has fallen," they said. Mr. Uche sat alone outside his house, holding his head in his hands, whispering, "This is what happens when a child is guided by pride instead of truth." Years passed like silent seasons, and the village slowly forgot the loud pain of the past. Until one morning, a black car entered the dusty road. People came out slowly, confused, watching as a woman stepped out. She was Ada, but not the Ada they remembered. She stood tall, elegant, dressed like someone who had seen the world and survived it. A doctor's badge rested on her chest, and her eyes carried calm strength. The same girl who once walked barefoot with broken dreams had returned with dignity. Mr. Uche saw her from afar and froze. His hands began to shake. Then suddenly, he walked forward and broke down crying before her. "Ada, my daughter, is this really you?" he asked in a trembling voice. Ada dropped her bag and held him tightly. "Papa, I came back." He cried like a child, holding her as if afraid she might disappear again. "You did it, Ada. You did what I could only pray for." She smiled through tears and said softly, "We did it, Papa. You never left me alone." For a moment, it was peace. But then, Mr. Uche's face changed. He pulled back slowly, his eyes heavy. "Ada, there is something you must know." Her smile faded. "What is it, Papa?" His voice broke. "Rose and your mother, they are in prison." Silence fell like a stone. Ada did not speak. Her eyes filled with tears, but she did not let them fall at first. She just stood there, breathing slowly, as if the world had stopped. "How?" she finally asked. Mr. Uche looked down. They chose a wrong path, and it destroyed them. Ada closed her eyes tightly. A single tear fell, then another. But she wiped her face quickly. After a long silence, she said, "I will not go there." Mr. Uche was shocked. "They are still your family." Ada's voice was soft but firm. "Some wounds become too deep to touch. If I open them again, I may never heal." Mr. Uche said nothing. He only nodded slowly, understanding her pain. Days later, Ada took her father with her abroad. She refused to leave him alone in the village. "You carried me when I had nothing," she said. "Now I will carry you." Mr. Uche smiled quietly, finally resting after years of struggle. Life abroad was gentle to Ada. She continued her work as a doctor, helping lives she once only dreamed of saving. In time, she met a man, a billionaire who was not impressed by wealth, but by her heart, her story, and her strength. He listened when she spoke,
and respected the silence behind her eyes. He once told her, "You do not need to prove anything to the world anymore." Ada finally allowed herself peace. Not loud happiness, but calm peace built from pain survived. Far away, Rose remained in prison, and Mrs. Vera lived with the weight of regret. Everything they once protected through pride was gone. Ada never returned to that place again. And in her quiet new life, she often remembered one truth her father once taught her without saying it directly: that life does not destroy people suddenly. It destroys them slowly through choices. The final truth remained like a village saying carried by the wind: envy destroys the person carrying it long before it destroys anyone else.